experience coming to these things, and I see this thing grow every year, and I'm talking to a lot of people this year, and I swear to God, I've been to a lot of conferences and meetings and stuff, and you guys are probably the most interesting group of people I've ever met. Seriously, there's so much knowledge here at this gathering. It's incredible, and from everything to Bigfoot and treasure and UFOs, and it's just the whole gamut of stuff, and it fascinates me. I just love it all. And so if you guys want to talk afterwards and hit me up with some stuff, that's fine. And for those who don't follow me on Facebook, I've got like 3 different pages you can follow our stuff on. Alien Dave, Area 52, Space Wolf Research, and my personal page, Dave Rosenfeld. So feel free to hit me up if you want. And, big kudos to Mark for mentioning my artwork. I've just started painting again this winter, and I've just been knocking them out. I just love it. And so I do commissions. I've done a few commissions this year, and people love it. So if you guys want something done, just hit me up. I didn't really have anything planned to talk about here this year, but a lot of newbies and stuff this year. So I'm going to kind of go through a little history of why I got into this and what made me interested in this UFO field. When I was about 25, so this is 25 years ago, I was having some really strange contact with UFOs, getting really close to them and taking pictures, and it seemed fairly odd that, here I am, a local guy, and just started seeing this weird stuff. I would get these like intuitions or feelings to go for drives, and it was no particular place. I'd end up on a snowmobile trail in the middle of the winter and middle of the night, and I'd see stuff. It was almost like what Ryan Burns was talking about last night was it wants to display itself and be seen, and it kind of chooses who that is. But between about 98 and 2002, I was getting a lot of close encounter type stuff going on, and so I got into it for my own answers to try to figure out what was going on. And in that time, in that 3-4 year period, there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of ridicule for me coming out and trying to tell what I've seen. And I've gotten that kind of stuff for 25 years, and I've gotten a little used to it. And there's always going to be non-believers, but you come to groups like this, and there's a lot of open minds. And so I like to speak in front of people like you because you take it a little bit more seriously and don't throw the ridicule factor out there and all that. And what I've learned in my research is that the UFO subject seems to dive into just about everything: history, government, military, religion. I mean, it just goes on and on. So the more questions you have about the subject, it seems like the answers you get just raise more questions. And so I have kind of taken a back seat to ufology in the last year or two. I've really just tried to do what my heart says and explore this state for all its beauty and mysteries. And I love to take photographs. So I mean, I love to see these spots that you see in the books and on the websites, and you're like, that is cool. But I have to go see it. That's just me. I have to see it in person. I have to experience those type of things. So a lot of my personal experiences are from just that. I have an inclination to go out and just find certain things or experience certain things, and given enough time, they present themselves. And a lot of my friends that like to hang out with me and do things, they always say, you hang out with Alien Dave long enough and you're going to see some weird stuff. And I've seen some weird stuff in my life. I don't claim to be like an expert on it or anything like that, and I don't like to give myself titles, but if I was to give myself a title, it wouldn't be UFO researcher or UFO expert. It would be like a UFO explorer, because I love to just go out there and get in these type of places where these type of things might happen. Got interested in Skinwalker Ranch back in '97 when the story first came out, and I've been following that ever since. I met Terry Sherman. We had lunch with him. I've met Bigelow at one point. I've met all his staff when he was running the place. I got VIP access from Brandon Fugel, the new owner, and that was kind of a bucket list thing too as well. And so I've been very familiar with Skinwalker Ranch, and getting in kind of tight with the Blind Frog crew as well. And we have the property there next door to Skinwalker, and some weird stuff. We found some weird stuff on that property and seen some weird stuff. That used to be our own little Skywatch area before Ryan bought it, and we used to park there, and the sheriff would show up and ask us what we're doing, and we're like, look at all the trash we picked up, and just trying to be cool with everybody. And so we got into kind of tight with the law enforcement, and they'd leave us alone when we went out there. But we've seen some strange things, some orbs. We photographed strange animals out there, UFOs, just strange voices in the air, all sorts of stuff we've seen at Skinwalker Ranch. But what I've been known for mostly in the media is my work with Dugway, Area 52, the Utah Test and Training Range. When I started my website in about 2000, I put up a page called Area 52 Dugway. And it got pretty popular. My website was hitting Associated Press and all this because of the Olympics and all this going on. And I started getting a lot of contact from people who work out there, contractors, people that live on the base, and got literally hundreds of weird, strange stories from that place about the technology that they're testing, about just strange animals that they're seeing, like test animals that got loose, losing their fear of death by working out there. There was another guy that we put him through the test. He passed all the tests that we threw at him. We knew he worked out there. He was coming to our MUFON meetings. We called him Dugway Dave, and he said, quote, I've been working on a craft that's second generation called the Venture Star, and I built the landing gear for this craft. And I've never been aboard it, never got to see the cockpit, never got to see the propulsion system. All I do is work on the landing gear. I know this craft exists, he says, because I make the landing gear for it. He also made the landing gear for the first gen, and he said that craft went into outer space and hasn't returned yet. So it's still on its mission. The craft that he was working on was second gen, and he says this makes regular flights to the moon. It can reach Mars in 30 hours and can take 33 people up into space at a time. Needs no booster rockets, needs no ground support. It's fully self-contained. And he says these are these are the type of planes that the Aurora project was working on. So this is a black project type plane that is housed here in Utah at Michael Army Airfield, or lifts off from Michael Army Airfield. I was sent a picture last year. I was going to show it last year, but I didn't. I actually brought it, but there's no way to get it up on the screen. But I have sent it to Mark and showed a few dozen people around here today. This picture. So if you want to see it, just hit me up afterwards. I can show it to you on my phone. This is a picture that was taken at Topaz Mountain by some rock hounders. That's about, 3 miles away from that runway, from Michael Army Airfield. They said it was about 11 o'clock at night when they seen this thing take off from the airfield. Triangular in shape, kind of rounded corners, leaving a glittery, glowing trail as it was flying away with two propulsion things out the back. But they said it was completely silent. Even though they could see like propulsion engines on it or whatever, they said it was completely silent. made no noise. And so the picture they gave me shows a vehicle in the picture, which gives scale. And you can see the glittery trail. You can see the shape of the craft. It's probably one of the best night shots I've seen of a UFO. Clearly shows the shape and all this. So if you guys want to see that, hit me up. But Michael Army Airfield is the second longest runway in the world. The longest runway in the world is the Air 51. So that kind of tells you something, that there's a lot of secret stuff going on in the second longest runway in the world. When they built this runway, the media said they built it for cargo planes. And you don't need a runway that long or that wide for a cargo plane. The UFO researchers look at Michael Army Airfield as one of the few spots on the planet where you could land a TR-3B. And the TR-3B is the big flying triangles that people have been seeing worldwide. And the rumor is that some of these TR-3Bs, the Black Mantas, are like a half mile on a side. So you can actually land an airplane on this airplane. And they're made to stay in the atmosphere for months at a time. They create their own fuel in the atmosphere, but they have kitchens and gyms and all sorts of stuff aboard because they more or less live in the atmosphere for months at a time. The aircraft was built so they wouldn't have to land it. So if you think about it, if you owned 5 of these planes, you could probably rule the world. I mean, they have the capability of anti-gravity propulsion. They can deploy weapon systems within minutes. I think these are one of the type of craft that Area 51 was actually developed for, was to develop planes that could intercept nuclear weapons before they went ballistic. That was the objective of Area 51, was to keep these kind of black project planes a secret. But throughout their time there, they ran into extraterrestrial material, and they housed some of that there too. But this is my own belief. I believe that because Area 51 was becoming so popular, that they moved a lot of the space projects that they had to Utah. Because if you think about it, we've got about 5 companies here in Utah that build space planes, build rockets, build space parts. So if they're building it here, why wouldn't they test it here? And from the correlation in the correspondence that I've got from people that work out at Dugway, that's exactly what they're doing. Is that they're testing weapon systems, space planes, exotic type weaponry. We've witnessed some of that weaponry out there on some of the sky watches we have. Back in 2002, some of the footage that we took out there was on every news station in Utah. It made every station. Fox 13 took about a year to air their story because they wanted to look into it more. They actually contacted Dugway and said, what's going on here? The spokesperson at first totally denied it, and then they said, well, you might want to take a closer look at your pictures because your signage is in the pictures, along with what they were photographing. So they finally admitted that it was their base, that the pictures were taken. This was on the southwest side of the range where I-15 cuts through their property out to Wendover at the Knowles recreation area. And I was turned on to this area by a person that works at Dugway and says, if you go out there on Friday night, you might see something. And usually he says might, but you're going to see something. And so him and me actually got in trouble a little bit for posting this type of data online, and I got people knocking on my door saying you can't do that. And so I had to be really careful of what I post and the words I use online. So anyways, we went out there and we watched this test, which was some kind of maser laser type test because it was going through the cloud, this light. But what was strange was, we were out there, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, we were about to give up, and then we seen what looked like an arc welder off in the distance, a giant arc welder, like this flash type thing. And then from where that flash was coming from, a beam of light came out, pierced through the cloud and up into space. And we were all like, whoa, and so we're breaking out the video cameras and we're taking pictures and all this, and then we smelt what smelled like kind of like ozone, like static electricity in the air. And the beam went off, and about 10, 15 minutes later, we see the arc welder type light again, and the beam shoots off again. But this time was different. These blue lights came down from space above the cloud line, where it was piercing the cloud, and completely surrounded this beam of light like they were watching this test. So the beam of light goes off when the lights fly away. We had all this on video, caught all on photographs, 35 millimeter digital, like 5 different cameras. We sent it off to all the news stations and the Dugway watchdog group. And all the news stations aired it. They said, look at this strange light. But they never mentioned the UFOs in the picture that were clearly visible in the picture. They never mentioned that. None of them. Which what we thought was quite odd. And maybe it was because they talked with Dugway, and Dugway says, hey, don't talk about that. What was interesting, though, is when Fox 13 interviewed the spokesperson for Dugway about that event. And at first, like I said, she denied it. And then when there was proof that it was there, she said this, and this is very interesting. She said, our clients love their privacy. So any given time, there's 30 military contractors out there doing whatever they want because they love their privacy. And so you think about that. If they're building exotic weapons out there and this and that, everybody in Salt Lake is about 60 miles away and we're all downwind. That's a scary thought, considering Dugway's history of killing sheep and having things get loose and all that type of thing. It's kind of scary. So when you think about it, a lot of people don't like to go near that place because of that history. And so what better place to hide secrets than a place that no one wants to get near? Well, I've spent the last 20 years going all around this base. I've found all the vantage points, all the gates. I've documented just about the entire fence line. And there's spots on that base where you could hide some technology really, really easily. Now, who here is into the UFO subject? Raise your hands. How many of you know of Stephen Greer? Okay, so there's some Stephen Greer fans out here. Well, Stephen Greer rallies Congress every year to try to get these whistleblowers immunity for the stories that they've witnessed or been a part of, and most of these people are pilots or people that work in the military, really high credential people, and they have a lot to lose by telling their story. So Stephen Greer kind of tries to help them not get punished for telling their story. And in that, there are people at Dugway that are the same way. They are very scared of what they've seen, and they don't really want to tell people. But they kind of hit me up on the side, and I meet them in private, and they tell their story. And some of this stuff I would never repeat. It would get people fired, it would get people killed or whatever, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to get people in trouble. But there's been a few instances where people have showed me pictures of what they've taken out there, and they're incredible. And of course, I couldn't, like this one lady I met, she says, I have something to show you. I want to show you what I know from working out at Dugway. And so I met her at Denny's, and she was still in her fatigues. Very nice young black lady, and she said, she broke out, she pulled out her purse, and she pulled out the picture, and I went to grab it. She says, nope, I can't let you have it. She would not let me hold it even. She would just show it to me, because she knew that she could get in trouble as well. And so she showed me this picture, and it was her and 2 other individuals, and they're in their uniforms out there, and they're standing in front of this Humvee unit with all these antennas and stuff on it, like some communication Humvee or something. And in back of that, maybe 60 feet, and about 30 feet off the ground was a flying saucer. And what was really weird about that, it had an American flag on it. And so the first thing I thought of was, why would they paint an American flag on it? You know, this type of stuff, is they want to keep that hush-hush, and if anything, they would blame it on aliens and say, oh, it's not ours, you know. It's aliens. But what we've found out is probably half, at least half, of what people report is ours. It's our stuff, and it's been secret. You look at the stealth airplanes out there right now that we know about, right? That's 40, 50-year-old technology. So you think about what they have nowadays that's secret, that they're not showing you. And I believe that one of those craft are the TR-3Ds that we'll eventually find out, oh, yeah, this is ours, but it was back engineered technology. There's rumors out there of whole mountains opening up. I had a security guard willing to show me around. I said, well, you're just going to show me the surface. Everything you guys got secrets underground. He goes, yeah. I said, so well, why would you want to tour me around on the surface? He says, well, there's one thing I could show you, and that's the entrance. I says, oh, well, I know where the entrance is. I've seen it. It's by Granite Mountain. He says, well, okay. Then you don't need me to show you around. But that's clearly visible on satellite maps and all that. You can clearly see the entrance to Granite Mountain. There was a contractor that I met at Comic-Con. He said he worked out there, and that they actually closed that part of the mountain down because of bats. Bats took over the underground entrance there, and they couldn't kill them because they were endangered, and so they more or less give it. I'm like, no way. There's no way they're going to tunnel into a mountain and spend all that kind of money and then give it up to bats. So I thought the guy was kind of pulling my leg and trying to push me away from looking at the place, and I get that a lot from people, let's just say, that work in the military and don't want me to know things or don't want me to say things. They try to send me in the wrong direction. I have little tests for these people that I throw at them to see if they're legit or not, and some of them fail right away, so I know who to watch out for. But every now and again I get these guys that have these incredible stories from that place, and they pass every test. And I'm like, okay, they've been out there, they work out there, they know a particular building or what this looks like out there, so I know that they're at least out there for a little while to know those type of things. And some of them have some really incredible stories, but the main thing about Dugway is just about every weapon system that you know about has been tested out there. Everything but nuclear weapons. So everything up to about 11 megatons has been tested out there. And a lot of top secret stuff. I mean, it's mostly weaponry and stuff, but a lot of the space planes and space technology has been tested out there. I mean, we have Morton Vicol here testing rockets. We have all these Raytheon and all these space-related type of companies that are kind of on the hush-hush. I have one right down the street from where I work called Skunk Works. And it's just an everyday-looking building, and you hardly see anything going on there, but you know what's going on behind those doors is they're building space secret stuff. If you look up Skunk Works, it's owned by Lockheed. So it's hiding in plain sight facilities. But that's just part of what made me do what I like to do here, and UFOs are just part of that. I've had, let's say, contact since I was little, since I was 5, and it's been in my life up until I was about 27. And then it seemed like they were done with me, and they're more interested in my boys now. And that's another. I'll tell you stuff about that later. But the author down here talking about abductions. It seems to start right about then, when they're 4 or 5 years old, and they come back when you hit puberty, and then they come back about when you're 22, 25, and there's an agenda behind that, and it's mostly genetics. We made a treaty back in 1952 where we traded software for hardware. And you can look this up. It's legit. It's documented. The aliens wanted software, which meant genetic material, and we wanted the hardware. We wanted the technology. So the deal was made, And little do people know that the U.S. government sold them out and said, you can abduct people for this genetic material. And so a lot of people have been taken, and they don't even know it. Most people that have been taken have a false memory of what happened. And they love to do this because they take something from your own mind that's common and familiar to you and replace themselves with it. And so you see a lot of this in the movies because it's so common. They like to use owls as themselves as far as a memory goes. So Whitley Strieber has the owl story. You look at the Fourth Kind, the movie, there's owls in that. There's a picture of an owl, and the owl's turning its head and all this type of thing. You see it in all these movies because that's exactly what happens. It's exactly what people describe. It's what they remember. They're an owl, not an alien. Okay, and I've had owls in my life, my entire life. And I think that's part of it too, is this false memory type thing. But there has been times where I have been with them where I totally remember everything. And it's not pleasant. They're very interested in us for, I think, something that they don't have. And that's the ability to dream. They don't get money. They don't get that at all. They don't get parental love. They don't get how a mother will do anything to save their child, and the way they hold it. They're fascinated by that concept. They just don't know what that is. So they're totally interested in watching you interact with kids. The ones I dealt with are totally telepathic. It's not words, it's pictures and feelings, which is a more true way of communication. And once I got over the fear of the ones in my face, there's different ones in the background. At first, when it first started, all I seen was the ones that were in my face, and it was terrifying because these are non-humans, and they're poking you and prodding you and downloading stuff into you, and it's overwhelming. But after a couple times, when you can kind of let that fear go and see what's in the background, that's when the real truth hits. That it's not just one type. They're in cahoots with each other. It seems like they have an agenda, and that agenda is genetic material. And what really scares me about the whole thing, because I've experienced a little bit of it, and I'm pretty sure it scares the U.S. government and the governments of the world, is, like I was having a conversation with someone earlier, is a lot of these abductees and contactees are women, and they're pregnant, right? And they get abducted, and then they're not pregnant anymore. And so they take the baby, the fetus. And so what's scary about that thought is, okay, you take a total 100% human fetus, and you take it aboard a spacecraft and you raise it like an alien. So it has the alien mind, but it's 100% human. Then they could put that back on planet, and it can walk among us. There could be one here today, and you would never know it, because they're 100% human, but with an alien mind. So think about that. That's probably one of the things that scare the U.S. government so much, is they know that this is probably happening, and that the hybridization project is been going on since the 50s. And so when we take this technology that we exchanged or we recover from craft that are crashed or what have you, and the government makes weapons out of it instead of trying to help the planet, that's when the aliens kind of look at us like, these are dangerous children and we're not going to deal with them anymore. As far as the governments go, we're not going to do it. So they stopped decades ago dealing with authority figures, leaders of the world, militaries, and now they're starting to go one-on-one with the people. And I do believe that a lot of people have had experiences. They're either too scared to come forward and tell their stories, or they have this false memory that's been implanted that's so strong that they don't remember exactly what's happening. And I believe the numbers are probably way higher than than we realize or want to accept. But we, at least, this is my opinion, we have never been alone. This UFO phenomenon is nothing new. It's been around for eons, and you can look at petroglyphs and ancient writings and all sorts of stuff and find evidence of this. The only thing that's changed is this terminology. Instead of chariot of fire, it's UFO or UAP. So UAP is a new terminology that just came out in the last couple of years. I mean, it was never heard of until the military started releasing these videos and stuff, and they call them the unknown aerial phenomenon instead of unknown flying object. So the terminologies just changed. So the terminologies will change again, and it's changed throughout history. You can find it in the Bible when it talks about God living on a column of light with a thunderous roar. That to me sounds like a liftoff. And so we were just trying to describe back then what we didn't have words for. We didn't have the word extraterrestrial back then. It was those who came from the sky or God. And I believe that a lot of these godlike beings throughout history were extraterrestrials. And we didn't have any other word for it. Because, I mean, if we were to go back in time with what we have in our pockets right now, our cell phones and this and that would seem godlike to a lot of people back 200 years ago. You would have something that was so far advanced that they couldn't even comprehend it. And that's exactly what's going on with the technology from other planets. It's so far advanced that it seems godlike. And so, like Phil here did, I always like to do an experiment with all my crowds that I talk to and ask, how many here have seen a UFO? Maybe a third. Okay, how many of those have reported it? One. And that's the problem what we have with this research is the data just isn't coming in because people don't report it. If everybody was to report, just to file a 5 little minute thing online and put your details in, the shape, the speed, the direction, just your sighting. That information is so valuable when it comes to masses of them. I know that Brandon Fugel is also doing work kind of on the side with abductees, doing the same type of thing with abductees and contactees. He now says that this company that's doing this knows if you're lying about being abducted. Because there's so many traits now that they say, this is a commonality between contactees and abductees. If you didn't have this happen or don't have these coming out, then you haven't been taken. You're making it up. And I don't know who would make that up because they lose a lot of credibility and they get a whole lot of ridicule and stuff thrown their way. So people to come forward that have had experiences with aliens or non-human entities is what I like to call them, because we don't know if they're from another planet. They could be from another dimension for all we know. So there's just non-human entities. I think the number is quite large, and I think it's going to get bigger. I think what they're doing with this disclosure with the UAPs is trying to spoon feed us so we don't freak out. I don't think the majority of the planet's going to freak out, but there's going to be people who really are not going to like the truth and won't be able to handle the truth. But I think the majority of the planet's ready, and I think that they're coming out with this because they're not going to be able to hide it forever. And what's interesting is they came out with these videos from, say, F-16s and Apache helicopters. This is 1990s technology as far as filming goes. When the F-22 Raptors have 4K, the F-16s are still running, beta. So it's like, this is old technology, but that's why they're releasing it, because it's not showing a whole lot of detail and this and that. But people who were on those Navy ships are saying there's much better footage. They're just not releasing it. We have footage. He says I've seen footage that is very detailed and it shows exactly what that is. There's no guessing what that is at all. that gimbal footage, you can almost guess because it's kind of blurry and it's kind of out of focus, and you don't really see the shape of the craft. You see the aurora, the energy field coming off the craft, and it's that, but you don't really see the actual shape of the craft. And then I think that's probably why they released that kind of footage. And not only does it say that, oh yeah, there's something out there that we don't know. We know it's not drones, we know it's not the Chinese or the Russians or whatever, it's something else, whether that be a rogue society or a Batman type of guy, some billionaire out there making stuff without anybody knowing about it. It could be something like that, but for all intents and purposes, they're releasing it to say the aliens are real, that UFOs are real. And now that that's been exposed and the government admits that UFOs are real, now the question is, who's flying them? Who's behind it? And if you look in the Pentagon archives and there's some other National Archive stuff that it lists like over 20 species of aliens that come to the planet, and 12 are common. So 12 come a lot, and the other ones they just know about. There's all sorts of evidence from the military as well that doesn't reach the public eye that proves that there's some kind of non-human intelligence in our solar system all over the place. Like Jupiter has got a craft around it, and it's been hinted in movies, 2001, The Odyssey, and this and that. That craft has been there ever since they started sending satellites to other planets. And they took pictures of this thing, and it's like 22 miles long. And they don't know who that is. And it's even listed in some of the Pentagon documents. They're going, okay, well, we know these ones and we know these ones, but we don't know who that is. This one around Jupiter. And there's enough evidence, I think, on our closest neighbors on Mars and on the moon of evidence of extraterrestrial visitation or habitation or civilization, whatever you want to call it, from a long, long time ago. So this is nothing new. It's ancient. And we're just relearning it, re-seeing it, renaming it with our new terminology. And so if there was ever a time in history, I think, where we are waking up to some reality, I think it's now. And I think we're all witness to this major event, because I do believe it's a major event. To know that we're not alone on this planet is something that we've been asking for a long, long time. And if there's proof of that, then that's a huge step for humanity. It's a huge time in history where we can say, okay, now we absolutely, without a doubt, know that we're not alone on this planet. We never have been, and we're not alone in the universe. I think that the UFO subject is one of the most fascinating because of the mystery involved, the fear, the ridicule. It all comes with it, and there's always more to it. There's always more questions to be asked. And the more you look into it, the farther down the rabbit hole you see it go. And you start following it, and you're like, oh, NASA's involved, and private companies are involved, and oh, there was presidents involved, and it just goes on and on and on. It's crazy. You find out, oh, the Vatican's got a huge library. Oh, the Rothschilds have a museum that has a lot of alien technology, ancient stuff from the Egyptians, from the Mayans, that they've hidden away forever, more or less, because they don't want the mainstream media to know about it. But there are Egyptian masks that look like grays. There are stone, let's say, monuments that show what looks like monsters that were guarding like the hollow earth. All that kind of mystery stuff has been put in private collections. They're not on display. They don't want people to see that type of stuff because it questions history's motive. And just like the other night when they were talking about the Smithsonian and the giants, the Smithsonian kind of covered that up because I guess one of the head guys at the Smithsonian, it was against his belief. So he took it upon himself to to get rid of some of this evidence because it was against his belief. So he's like, well, I don't believe it, so nobody should. And that's probably happened all throughout history of these certain powerful types that just kind of like to, oh, well, knowledge is power. If they know that, then that's going to give them power. So we're going to just hide that, take that away so nobody knows about it. And that's quite true with even our top secret bases and stuff. And people always tell me, oh, why are you messing with them? You know, they're just trying to build weapon systems to protect the United States and this and that. I said, no, that's one of the least things that they're doing. You think all that black project money is going toward weapon systems? No, it's going toward control systems, to control people, to manipulate people. It's kind of an evil thing to think about, that there's people out there that would do that type of thing. Instead of making a 0-point engine, they're going to make a weapon out of it. To make something that would help the planet with its pollution or its poverty, or no, we're going to build weapons out of it instead. There's companies out there that are trying to head in the right direction. Correct Labs is one of them in California. They apparently got a hold of a primer. How many here have seen the movie Contact? Right? Remember the primer in that movie? So they got this information and they had to find the primer to make the data work. Right? So it was like a key, a mathematical key, so then they could read the rest of it. So it was a primer. Correct Labs came across an alien primer that connected all sorts of technologies, and they started making these little teeny motors about this big. 0-point. More or less, you can take this motor in your hand, turn it with your fingers, and it will run forever. It never loses any momentum. You could put this in your car, you could power your house. There's all sorts of implications you could do with this motor. And yet it's banned, of course, because it's a one-time thing. They're going to sell you the motor for whatever price they want to put on it, $5,000, whatever. That's it. That's the only time you'll ever be charged for power. They would never let that out to the public because you can't bill people for it every month. Right? It's all about the money. It's not about the planet or the people. It's about the money. So this type of technology exists, 0-point, that would save this planet. It would really save this planet, and it would eliminate a lot of the problems on the world. We fight over oil, we fight over land, we fight over energy, and that would solve all that because everybody would have free energy. Not Tesla type stuff, which is different. This is a technology that was handed down to us by non-humans. And we've made weapons out of it. And somebody had the foresight to say, look, let's make something that will help the world about that. And then Correct Labs is doing that. And it's very, very honorable for them to be doing that. And actually, their goal was to sell these motors for $1,000. So everybody could have one. Everybody could afford one. And they were shut down. You know why they were shut down, right? Because they can't bill you for it. But that's where we're heading in the UFO technology type thing. I've been to a couple crash conferences, and the people that show up at these things, these UFO crash conferences, are bigwigs. These are CEOs of companies. These are rich, powerful people that want the technology of a crashed UFO. And it's amazing the type of stuff that they talk about at these things, and the level of power that are at these conferences. You're like, whoa, that dude's got, he's got his own army to protect himself. It's like, these are dangerous people. And so it's nothing new. The scientists of the world know about this type of stuff. I watched we had the little conference. It wasn't PhenomenaCon, but it was the UFO Congress or something in Vernal earlier this year. How many went to that? Nobody went to that? That was a bummer. I mean, they had some of the Skinwalker guys there. Travis Taylor was there. I went exclusively to hear him talk. And his research on some of the UAP videos And one of his talks was he studied this footage from Mexico. And I don't know how many of you have seen this footage, but it's incredible. It's about the size of a basketball. And so there's no propulsion seen, there's no sound. But when you look at it through infrared, it's bleeding out the filter. It's so hot that it's going beyond what the sensor can pick up. So it's completely black on these videos, meaning it's super hot. And so for a basketball-sized object to go beyond a rocket motor or a F-16 motor, which is about 15,000 degrees, or 1,500 degrees, that's hot for a basketball-sized object to be floating around, doing its own thing under intelligent control. But what was really interesting is that when you watch this video, it passes between a building and this telephone pole. So they were actually able to triangulate that and get the size off this thing. And the speed, and it was going about 71 miles an hour. That's not very fast. But what happened was it flew out onto the beach and flew into the ocean and didn't leave any wake, no splash, and it didn't slow down at all. It still was going 71 miles an hour from the air into the water. Now, any physicist will tell you that's almost impossible. You would get drag from the water because it's different than the air, and that object would have slowed down when it entered the water, and it probably would have left a wake or a splash or something. So a lot of the scientists that Travis Trader was talking about, he said this craft, for it to do that, it would need like 2 F-16 rocket motors to propel it into the water and not lose any speed and go 71 miles an hour for however long it was in the water. He said that's impossible. There's no propulsion visible on this thing. There's nothing to power it. So what's making it do this? And then it leaves the ocean, comes back out into the air, and once again, doesn't leave a wake, doesn't leave a splash, and it's going exactly the same speed. Now, there's nothing on this planet that we own that can do that. It seems very simple, but we don't have anything that can do that. And it seems so simple to watch something like that happen, but not realize the physics involved with that. It's impossible for us to do that. So the technology is way beyond what we have. I mean, we don't have anything that small that can get that hot, fly around like a drone, enter another medium without any kind of drag. So what they're saying is that if this craft can do this, if it can enter the water without any kind of drag, without any kind of resistance, it can probably enter solid matter. And they were looking more closely at that film, and it looked like it went through a tree. So if it can go through a tree, go into water, different mediums, it could probably go into space, it could probably go through solid matter, fly into a mountain, and not have any kind of effect at all. And you would see nothing as far as like rock breaking loose from the mountain or any kind of thing like this. And they're calling it a different thing now, like transmedium technology or transmedium thing, but very interesting footage. I've heard some of this stuff before from a NASA guy that was telling me some stuff off the cuff. I get a lot of people that come to me and they say, we don't want to see any of this on your website. We don't want to see it in a book. I'll come out, I'll sue you. I'll come after you. But I'm going to let you know it. I'm going to tell you. And you can tell anybody word of mouth, but I just don't want to see it in print or anything like that because they can follow it back. But word to word, you can tell it all day long. And this guy from NASA more or less says, we lied about everything. And I said, what do you mean you lied about everything? He says, we lied about everything. About everything. He says, look at our facility in Florida. We have a huge building there. It's acres and acres and acres, and it's a movie studio. What is NASA doing with one of the largest movie studios on the planet? They're faking stuff. And if you look at some of their videos online, the NASA channel, you can see it. They're supposed to be aboard the International Space Station, and they're floating around like this, and all of a sudden, one of them's got a ball, and he drops it, and it falls to the floor. If they're in space, it's not going to fall to the floor. It's just going to float. And you could see one of the astronauts, a female one, go, oh, don't try to go down there and grab it. It's going to look weird. So it's all kind of an act. It's all kind of fake. And in this day and age, it's very easy to do with CGI and green screen. And I've actually kind of been a part of that with some of the TV crews that I've worked with. I've seen the fakery and I've seen the scripted BS that's on some of these shows. And so I'm not a part of a lot of the shows. And actually, I was just doing a show. I'm not going to name the show, but I thought they were pretty legit. And come here to Vernal and do a shoot with them, and they hand me a script. And I'm like, that's just not what I'm about, dude. I mean, so I kind of did it, and I learned from that experience that, hey, a lot of these shows out here are just BS. They want an agenda, and they have a storyline, and if you're kind of waver from that storyline, they just cut that out and put whatever they want in there. And I've dealt with that on many TV shows where I'm out here showing them Dugway. I'm out here, look, this is the spot where we've seen it. This is the spot over here. This is Granite Mountain. This is the entrance to the base. This is showing them this stuff. And then when the show comes out, they're showing B-roll of cactuses that are this tall. I'm like, that's Arizona, dude. That's not, or New Mexico. That's not even Utah. And you're throwing in all this B-roll that's BS, and it just makes your credibility to go downhill. And so when you guys watch these shows, just take that into mind, that a lot of it's just bullpucky mixed in with a little bit of truth. And we really have to watch out for that. But what I've found out is this group here is probably one of the most interesting and truthful people I've ever met. I've talked with a lot of you. I've seen some of the stuff you guys present, and it's awesome. It's just cool. And so when we're out here at Space Wolf Research, and we're doing our thing, one of the rules we made to ourselves was if we see anything, we're not going to embellish it. We're not going to lie about it. We're just going to release it to the public and let them make up their own minds. We're not going to hide anything. We're not going to make people sign NDAs. We're not going to hide anything. And it's exactly what we've been doing out there with, thanks to Ryan out here, because he allows a lot of researchers out there to bring their own equipment, their own technology, and test it and see what happens. And it seems like with Skinwalker and Space Wolf, that whole area there, it seems like when you bring in new things, that's when things happen, or when there's bad weather like this, that's when things happen. And it's an odd thing, but eventually we're going to find a pattern to all this and try to find some truth. But it's very, very interesting work. It's got me into a lot of trouble. I've taken a lot of flack, a lot of ridicule. There's been City Weekly articles on me that just throw me under the bus. Just character assassinations, and that's okay. It's okay, because I'm not into it for fame or money. I'm into it for my own truth. And in a way, I've kind of found that. And that's why in the last, 5-10 years or so, I've kind of let the UFO phenomena kind of slide a little bit and started doing my own thing, my own explorations into some other subjects that I find really interesting. And some of that stuff is like what Terry Carter does. The treasure and the petroglyphs and the ancient languages and the history of Utah. There's a lifetime of stuff here to see and experience. And if you don't get out there and see it, then you're just taking people's word for it, is what I found. Because a lot of people like to make stuff up and embellish and kind of make it more sensational. And they write their books, and you can tell it's a little bit of truth there with a whole lot of BS. And so that's me. I like to go out there and experience it myself. And so there's a lot of beautiful places here in Utah, a lot of mysterious places here in Utah. And I can guarantee you there's a lot more out there to be found. So people like you and me, we all need to go out there and do that. And I have a location here that I'm going to in the fall. I'm not going to mention where it is, but let's just say it's a restricted area with a whole lot of history. And I'm willing to put myself on the line to go in there and see if it's all real. And that's kind of what I've been doing since '97 is I don't have PhDs, I don't have a huge reputation to lose, and hey, I'm willing to put myself down a hole or over a fence to go find some of this truth. And if it gets me in trouble, so be it. But at least then I'll know what the truth really is. And in doing so, I've gotten, like I say, into a bit of trouble every now and again. I'm sure I'm on several lists. I know a few people here that are always also on those lists, FBI lists, that type of thing. I know when the Travel Channel interviewed the lady, the spokesperson out here, Doug Waste, Bill Burns from UFO Hunters mentioned my name, and they said, "Oh, that asshole. We know all about him. He's trying to push the Doug Waste, the new Area 51." And Bill Burns said right to her face, "Well, if it's not, then it will be. Because we know what's going on out here, and we have all sorts of people coming forward." You can say whatever you want. You're the spokesperson. You're the media, truth to most of the people who watch TV. But the real truth is the people who come forward from that base and tell their stories. Just like what you guys are doing here today, is telling your stories about treasure, about Bigfoot, about all these type of mysteries and thing. And I find that very, very cool. There's no other place that I'd rather speak than this place right here. I've spoken at Comic-Con, I've spoken at UFO conferences, I've spoken in front of TVs, and I can guarantee you there's no more authentic, real people that I've dealt with than these people right here. And I want to give you guys a hand for coming together and sharing what you guys know, because it takes a big heart to share things that not necessarily are conventional or acceptable in most people's eyes. And a lot of you guys here, probably most of you, have great open minds and accept people like me, like Phil here, they have different view on the world and experienced weird, strange stuff that we can't even ourselves explain, but that made us who we are. And what we do, we go out there and we want to see it, we want to document it, not to show everybody else, but to prove to yourself that this is real. What you experienced back 20 years ago, that was real. And the only way I have the way to prove that is to go and try and experience it again. Try to call it in, try to get it to display itself, try to do this or that. We try all different things. I've been Bigfoot hunting for 15 years. I've tried all sorts of things to get Bigfoot into certain areas. We leave them trinkets and fruit and all sorts, little things to try to interact with it and stuff, and it never takes anything. But we rake the ground and there's fresh tracks, so we know, hey, at least it was here. It came here and looked at it, but it never took anything. And then we come back 2 weeks later, oh, look, a younger one came here. It's a smaller footprint. We were finding family units out in the middle of the desert, in the West Desert, and you're thinking, what is Bigfoot doing out here? What exactly are they doing out here? It's just, there's nothing, there's no cover. What is it that they're doing? And what we found, I actually had a former sheriff from Tooele, an ex-bounty hunter with horses and stuff. They had lots of resources and time. He was retired. They wanted a board on this Bigfoot investigation that we were doing in the West Desert. So I says, you go do your own thing. I'm going to show you where we were finding track. You go do your own thing. You go do your own thing. We're going to get back here, meet back up in a month, and we'll go over our findings. And so that's what we did. I was going out there and I was finding, oh, there's a flag that this guy put out here to mark something. And I'm like, oh, there's a footprint. So I was finding these. And so what I did was I took my GPS unit out there and I was marking every footprint that I found on my GPS. And I would take it home and I would put it in a topo map maker program, and I'm like, oh, look, there's a trail. So I go back out there and I'm like, oh, yeah, sure enough, there's a trail. And this trail was being used by Bigfoot so much that it was padded down and packed. But where it went off the edge, where the ground was softer on the edges of the hills, you could see their heel prints and stuff going down. And they were all different sizes. It was a family unit. There was one of the tracks we got out there was 22 inches long. That's a big fella. But they were also like human-sized tracks out there. And you're thinking, okay, well, that's a young Bigfoot or a baby Bigfoot or something like that. But we all got together at Denny's, and we came to the same conclusion, that there was a family unit living out there seasonally. They were only using that area during the summer months, and then they would move south, down through Eagle Mountain, down in that area, following that same range, okay? From Oper, Mercer, Eagle Mountain, down south. And we were finding so much track, it was incredible. But what we found was a vantage point where a sentinel was sitting, where it would watch the canyon, okay? So one was sitting there the whole time, probably every day. And if humans came in, it would probably go alert the family, there's humans in the area, so don't go down there or whatever. But from that vantage point, their footprints were all facing one direction, like they were watching something, and then would go back down the same exact way that they came. And we're like, what are they watching? Dugway. For some reason, they're watching Dugway. From not even the highest vantage point, it was just a really good spot to watch. It wasn't way high, it was just a really good spot to watch. And when we found that out, when we came to that conclusion, that was about a year after the event at the depot. I don't know how many of you remember that. It was all over the news. There was 5 different agencies that responded to this. It was a trespasser or somebody at the chemical depot and dressed all in black. And the Humvee unit seen it. That's who reported it. The Humvee unit can go across that train at 60 miles an hour, so I don't know how come they didn't find this dude. But the Tooele Sheriff's Department, the local police department, the FBI, Homeland Security, and I think one other agency was all involved in this. It was big news at the time. The spokesperson for the depot came forward and says, we don't know who it was or what it was. And when he said that, I was like, this is a hop, skip, and a jump for where we're finding Bigfoot track. We can see the location of where this intruder entered the depot. So we're thinking, this was a Bigfoot. To disappear, have 5 agencies out there, helicopters, Humvees, all looking for this dude. They never found a vehicle. They never found the guy. And to be dressed all in black in the middle of the day out in the West Desert, you're going to stand out like a sore thumb. Right? So if you're going to infiltrate a base, that'd be the last thing you wore, was all black. I mean, you're going to stand out. So we came to the conclusion that what they seen out there, the Humvee units and all that, was Bigfoot. Because, I mean, we can see where the infiltration was on the base, and we're finding track at our feet. Like, that's nothing for a Bigfoot. So we had left that area alone. The lady that turned us on to that area was very worried about us killing it or killing them. And I said, I can guarantee you that's not going to happen. I never made the location public. It's still an active location. Every first snow, we go out there and we find track. And then it seems like they move away from that area because then we quit finding track. It's like they move south. So it's a seasonal type area. But see, these are just one of the things that I'm super into. It's not just UFOs, it's Bigfoot, it's cryptozoology. I don't know how many of you know that, how many here know that Utah has had crop circles? A few. We've had 14 since 1996, from Smithfield, Logan area, all the way to Spanish Fork. And I have visited every one of those. And some of them are obviously fakes, and other ones are obviously real. And if you know anything about crop circles, then you know that the crop is bent. It's not broken. It continues to grow sideways. It never comes back up to the light, to the sun. It continues to grow sideways. I went to one in Idaho, in Teton, Idaho. Was there within 13 hours of it happening. And one of the farthest circles, the farmer says, we've been keeping everybody out of that. I said, good, can I go in it? He's like, I don't know. I said, well, this is kind of what I do. I said, I'm here to document it and measure it and all this type of thing. And I said, I know what I'm looking for. and I will share everything with you. He says, okay. I says, well, can you do me a favor then and keep everybody out of that one particular part of the circle while I'm in it? He says, absolutely. So I went in there and I measured all the circles, which way the swirl pattern was going, and what I noticed was in that far circle, there was a sprinkler line that went through the field that was all, I don't know, 2 feet or so below the top of the crop. So if you're out there at night with a board and rope trying to make a crop circle and you hit this sprinkler pipe, you're going to break it. The wheat and barley right there is where you're going to find evidence of it being broken, because they're going to go, oh, there's a pipe. But no matter where I went along this pipe, where the crop circle hit this pipe, it was like water. It was just flowing over that pipe so perfectly, and not a break. I couldn't find a break on any stalk on that barley. It was perfect. It was like something just heated that barley up and it just laid right over that pipe. That's something that humans can't do. They call it the spaghetti effect. BLT Research Center does a lot of work on crop circles, and they call it the spaghetti effect, where you take a piece of spaghetti and you heat it up and you can bend it. And then when it cools down, it stays bent, right? You try to do it without heating it up and you break it. The same thing with the wheat and barley. Okay? Crop circles are not just in wheat and barley, it's in corn. They've happened in ice. At Skinwalker Ranch, they found one in the ice. They're in sand. It's worldwide. It's not just one country. People are very surprised that it's happened here in Utah. And like I say about 70% of the ones I went to here in Utah were legit. They were definitely legit. We took some of the samples, we sent them off to BLT, same thing, exploded nodes, all the regular, kind of characteristics of a real crop circle. When I went to the very first crop circle in 1996, which was called Smithfield Joe, because from the air it looked like the name Joe. It was all connected. We got there and the farmer had already cut the crop all the way around it. It was just kind of a skeleton of a crop circle. And people were driving through the field and all that. Actually, we couldn't find it because it was mowed. So we were out here looking for a crop circle, and most of it had gotten mowed. So we actually asked the lady at the convenience store where it was. She goes, oh, it's right across the street. I'm like, oh, well, I can't see it. She goes, oh, well, they mowed it the other day. So we went out there anyways, was checking it out, and we noticed this light out in the field. And at first we thought it was somebody out there with a flashlight. Well, it was real teeny. And we're like, that's not somebody with a flashlight, that's something else. And so we started walking toward it, and it moved away. So we went toward it this way, and it moved away. So we're like, okay, I'm not going to chase it all night. Let's just walk back to the vehicle. So we started walking back, and we looked back, and it's now following us. So I was with this girl at the time, and I said, okay, I'm going to do something. Don't freak out. And I got my camera ready. And I said, let's just kind of start walking real fast toward the vehicle. So we started walking real fast. We looked back, and it's following us. And I turned around and ran right at it. And it didn't have time to react that fast, so it kind of stopped, and then it went this way. And I got a picture of it, and you could see the movement of it and all this. And so I got 4 or 5 pictures of this orb-like thing. And I sent them off to BLT Research, who does most of the crop circle investigations on the planet. And she said, Nancy Talbot said, well, there's the crop circle light phenomenon, but it's never been recorded in the U.S. I think you're the first to photograph the crop circle light phenomenon and interact with it in the United States. And I says, wow, I didn't know that. That's kind of cool. But she goes back out there. She goes, go back out there and get me some samples of that crop. And so we did, and we was working with her on that. And then the next year, the Smithfield Joe from the air, you could still see it with the new crop. So the new crop had grown, but you could still see the shape. And within a mile of that crop circle, there was another one, and they called it the Logan Mike, because from the air it kind of looked like the word Mike. And that one didn't look finished. It looked like it was almost, the end of it looked like they stopped, because it wasn't flat. It kind of went up on an angle and quit. And I thought that was very strange. And then the next year, we had one where the Smithfield or the Logan Mike was, but it was very different, and that was a fake. We walked in that, we knew that was somebody out there faking it. It was not woven, there was no kind of pristineness to it. It looked walked all over, and there was all sorts of broken stuff in there. We're like, this is probably a fake one. The most impressive one I've seen was the Teton, Idaho crop circle and the Spanish Fork crop circle that happened near the Hare Krishna Temple and was pointed at the dream mine. So it lined up. Most of the crop circles I've ever witnessed and ever studied or even looked at, they're near water, some kind of water source, a canal, a lake, what have you. And the Spanish Fork crop circle was no different. It was right next to a canal, probably 40 feet away from a canal. It was lined up with the Krishna Temple and the dream mine. I thought that was very unique. And I was there the next day after it happened. And I had to pay to get in. The guy was charging. I measured the whole thing out, took some readings, took some photographs, took some samples, took some soil samples for Nancy Talbot, this and that. The next day, it was added to. Something came in overnight. Now, the guy was out there selling tickets to this thing, to his own field. He was out there all night. He says, I've been here all night to keep people out of it, this and that. I never seen a thing. And yet, it was added to. There was 2 more circles added to it the next day, which was very, very odd, very, very suspicious. I even helped the farmer the next day look for entry points, like someone who might have come in overnight. He says, no, this whole place is guarded. And we had our whole family at her this last night because it is new, and we don't want people trampling all over it and wasting our money because we totally expect to harvest this field, and we don't want people walking all over it. So for that to happen when we're camping out here protecting our field was unheard of. He says, we've never seen anything. No lights, no sound, nothing. We woke up and it was different. So that's one of the things you got to take into account in some of these mysteries is that sometimes they come back and they want to finish it, or they come back because they're not done, or just like with the UFO stuff. I mean, I've had UFOs come one night and not see it again for weeks, and then weeks later in the same exact spot see it again. The same exact way, flew the same exact pattern, and you're like, okay, they're doing something over there. They have some kind of agenda, and so you got to take that with a grain of salt and put it in your gray basket. There's a lot of stuff like that. I was talking to a lot of people earlier about connecting dots, taking stories, putting them in a gray basket. Years later, you find something that correlates with that and makes it credible. And some of those stories I've shared with a few people here this weekend, and about connecting dots and about how 2 people, totally different parts of the world, sharing the same, almost exactly the same story. And they have no reason to lie. One was a ranger, Forest Service ranger, who witnessed 3 beings. He thought there was a car that went off a cliff or something, or some people down camping where they shouldn't be. Walked down there, seen a craft off the ground, 3 beings floating this elk upside down to the craft. And he was scared to death, ran out of there. He says, I've never been that scared in my life. There was 3 beings down there floating this elk to this 15-foot craft that was floating off the ground. Well, I live in Immigration Canyon. I was watching this guy walk up the canyon almost every day, and so I stopped one day and I'm like, hey, you guys, you need a ride? He goes, no, I do this every day, I'm good. And so, some days it's raining, and I stopped one day when it was raining. I'm like, sure you don't need a ride? He goes, no, I'm good. Had a guy come to my MUFON meeting and was talking about, he goes, oh, I got a story to tell. So we let him tell the story. And he says, oh, I know this guy he's a good friend of mine, lives up in Immigration. And he walks the canyon all the time. I'm like, oh, I know this guy. I've met him. I've talked with him. He goes, well, one time he was running up the canyon, full speed, just hauling butt up the canyon. So he yelled out the window, hey, you okay? And he just kept going. So he says, I had to actually drive up the canyon a little bit and pull over, get out, and physically stop him and say, what's wrong? What's going on? He says, oh, my God. can we just get out of here? Drive, I'll get in your car. Let's just go up the canyon. I don't want to be around here. So he gets him up, gets him home. The guy says, I thought somebody, because the guy walks this canyon all the time. He says, I thought somebody went over the edge, down into the creek. There was lights down there. So I walked down there, and I witnessed these two beings floating a deer upside down. And I'm like, what? That's almost exactly the same story as this ranger told me from Montana. These guys don't know each other. They're states apart, and yet almost exactly the same story. So when you hear stories, you have to put them in that gray basket, put them away for a while, because later on you might hear the same thing from somebody completely not related that correlates that same thing and puts credibility to their story. So with that, I'd like to just end and say thank you, and keep up the good work. And if you guys find the treasure, I want to see it. Okay? We'll see you.